There's a lot that we actually can be doing to support egg quality. One of the things I've also found, even in my patients that are working with fertility clinics, that they're not always testing everything that is important. There is sort of this misbelief that age is like the number one factor driving egg quality and that there's nothing we can do about it, which is actually very much false. Everything that I was telling patients to do, I was doing plus some.
You became a mom at 43 after 2 decades of dating. I can imagine there's a whole story there. How did you decide to finally pull the trigger, so to speak?
Well, I think there's like a couple of different aspects to it. So I always wanted I wanted the full package. I never saw myself as a single mom, but I definitely had that desire to have a child and have it with someone. Well, when I turned 40, actually I think it was like the week, and it was like also like it needed to happen by the time I turned 40 because of course after 40 it's impossible, right? So I remember it was like the week leading to turning 40 and I was like, okay, that goal didn't happen. Oof. I didn't get married and I didn't have a kid. And part of me was like, yes, that was what I wanted, but maybe something bigger. Maybe it's for the best. Like maybe it was for the best. Maybe because one of the hard things I think about being a doctor is you hear a lot of stories, and I mean I've had so far like a very positive motherhood experience. Not everybody has that, so unfortunately. Right. So I've heard the whole thing. So I'm like, maybe I'm being protected. And like, I had a pretty good life. I had a lot of friends. I did a lot of fun things. I was traveling. I basically, for a decade, I was going to France every year, sometimes staying for a whole month. So I had a pretty decent life. So I was like, okay, you know what? This is fine. And, maybe I'll meet someone or a couple someones and we'll have these like fun romantic trips and like, I just got into this whole fantasy. Then the world shut down. So I basically turned 40 a couple months before the pandemic. But I was like, okay, great. It's terrible to be a single person again. I was a little bit happy, not like happy, but like, a few weeks later when all my friends that were married or even had roommates or had kids, everybody seemed that was cohabitating. It was actually worse. So it was actually almost like better to be alone. So I met someone that fall of 2020. We dated for a while. There was like other issues within the relationship, but he was very like anti-kids. Like, I don't ever want to have kids, which I feel like that's so final. Even though I kind of felt like I'm like, my eggs are probably bad. I don't even know if I can have kids. But I don't know. It just bothers me.
I completely agree. Yes.
It really bothered me. So I broke up with him, whatever. It wasn't just because of that. There was other things. But I think because of the fact that, like, he really didn't want to have kids, it made, like, breaking up with him pretty easy. A year later, I met my husband, who you know, and he was very open to having children, but also at the same time, like, if it didn't happen, that was okay. And that was exactly sort of like where I wanted to lay things, because I also felt, specifically for myself at that time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go through IVF or do all these things, have that pressure put upon me of being able to like have a child. Like, so I didn't want somebody who's like, we need to have children and you can do we can do every single experimentation on you as many times and to make that happen. I was like, because I wasn't sure if I like wanted to do that. In fact, one of the conversations I actually had early on with my husband was that because I actually didn't freeze my eggs, and that's like a whole other opinion and things around that. And one of the only times I really got really angry at my husband early on in our relationship was, he's like, well, you probably aren't really serious about having kids. Again, just because I didn't freeze my eggs it's not true. It's not true, whatever. Anyway, But I had told him I would actually be even open to doing donor eggs because the math computes and there's more likelihood, specifically at my age, if we did donor eggs, that we would have a successful pregnancy. Plus also, like, I didn't want to do the egg retrieval. Anyway, this is just my own journey, and this is not necessarily whatever works for other people, but this is just my own journey. So, needless to say, we did eventually get married. But even prior to us getting married, because again, there was like this open communication and this, potential desire of having a child, I basically just did every single thing. This is even before we even got engaged. I got my testing and everything done, and my AMH was that's anti-Mullerian hormone, which is looking at ovarian reserve. It wasn't terrible. It was definitely not good, but it was because it wasn't terrible, it gave me hope. I basically, everything that I was telling patients to do, I was doing plus some. And then I also put my husband on a bunch of things. And this is even before we got engaged.
I love that. What are some of the things? Were they supplements or?
Oh yeah, so it was a couple. So I took a lot of supplements, and I whittled it down to a couple key supplements, and I actually even got him a little box and made sure that he took them.
Love that. And he was game?
Yeah, so my husband is usually his first reaction is no, and then the next morning he's you're really smart. Let's do this, or whatever. So I took a lot of things. I definitely took a lot of supplements, and I put him on some things. I also I wasn't a big plastic user in general because I mostly cook my own food, but I really did everything I could to really eliminate plastics. I also I hardly really wear makeup. I hardly use the personal care. I've always really leaned more towards green products. I completely cut out alcohol. Totally cut out alcohol. What else did I do? I think that those were
You continued meditating.
Yes. I always continued meditating. I continued my dance practice. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I did. It was a lot of supplements that I was taking. But we got married in June of 2023. No, 2022. We got married June.
Congratulations. Wow.
Thank you. And yeah, we managed to conceive naturally that August.
Incredible.
Yeah, it was the coolest thing was we found, so there's that tradition or segula or that belief when somebody has a bris that a childless couple helps basically escort. The wife escorts the mother, and that actually can help you have a kid or whatever.
I never heard of it.
Oh, you never heard of that?
No, please tell us more.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to botch the name. I think they're called Kvetrim, but basically they're escorts, I guess. So that we did that for my husband's cousin's bris.
So you were the escort?
Right.
Huh.
And there's there's a couple other things in Judaism that can help potentially for childless couples. So we did that for my husband's cousin, and that was actually the same day that we found out that I was pregnant. Woo! And so my joke, my husband doesn't think it had anything to do with it, but you never know.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you've always worked with women in that category who are trying to conceive. Is that?
Yeah. So I've worked with. I'd say it's one of my specializations is working with women, or I actually would even say working with couples, because that is really important. You have to. It's not always on the woman's side. Even when we think about something like a miscarriage, usually it's most likely due to a chromosomal abnormality, but it isn't just because of the egg. It also could be because of the sperm. I always look at the couple, if there is a couple. Sometimes, I've worked with same-sex couples trying to get pregnant. So we're just assuming that the sperm that they're getting, or somebody who is a single woman trying to get pregnant via a sperm donation, the assumption there is that that's pretty good sperm. So we're only working with the woman. But I really believe that it's important to really look at both partners, even if the husband, boyfriend, whoever is saying, I have the best semen analysis, which is like looking at sperm. It doesn't tell you everything. So it's still really important to address the health of the male partner.
So you have the man check themselves or go to a conventional doctor to get that checked. Is that right?
So I would always start with the semen analysis, but it's also important to also look at their thyroid, look at their vitamin D, their folate levels, their iron levels, different markers of inflammation. So and also even finding out, like, are they on medications? Because certain medications can affect fertility, specifically when we, back to the old SSRIs, because it can have sexual side effects, and that can actually that can have an impact on if somebody's going to get pregnant if they can't ejaculate or they can't maintain an erection. That's probably going to be a little bit difficult. It's interesting, like the beginning of the pandemic, my business really tanked, and then it was like, I think it was like around like June, it was like unbelievable.
Wow, okay.
It was because everyone was now really going online. And so my practice was not just New York, New Jersey patients, but like all over the States. And then I actually was getting really random, like international patients, like from United Arab Emirates. So things were really blowing up. Plus, I started working with a marketing person. I was doing a lot of interviews, a lot more blogging, playing around with like different video formats, really working towards building up my YouTube channel. So I was pretty busy.
And then how did you find time for anything else?
So I guess so it's part of my personality. I just like doing. I just really, I'm not like, I don't know, I'm not like I'm not a downtime kind of person. Like, case in point, when I was in naturopathic school. So, okay, it was a lot of coursework, but I still managed. So that meditation center that I started out with, I ended up getting very involved there. So I was like volunteering there. I also was taking, I'm going to say at least like 2 to 3 dance classes a week. That dance studio, so I was a poor grad student, so anything that I could get for free, my goodness. I was actually cleaning the dance studio to get free classes. Plus, I was also doing work exchange at a yoga studio. So I was also doing yoga and work exchange. There was a soup kitchen next to my house that I would volunteer. I think I only volunteered there maybe every other week. Plus, I started taking like acting classes, and I was doing a little bit of acting. So I just always like doing a lot of things. I'm not the type of person who's just going to sit like scrolling on my internet. It's just not my personality.
How is it that you are still so calm and collected with everything that's going on and being a mom? Because from what I'm seeing, especially in New York, it's such a chaotic place that it's hard for a parent to stay present for their child.
Right.
How are you doing it?
Well, I feel, so it is true, after the birth of a child, a woman completely changes and the man stays the same. And there's like this like conflict of like how that happens. And I would also say when you become a mother, there's like these different stages of change. I ended up having a C-section, which that was a big physical change because I'm a very active person. So, and I wanted to make sure that I recovered very well. So that really meant that for a while, I was like really almost doing nothing. From like the first 2 weeks, you really can't do anything. And then I can try and think. I think I wasn't back dancing until another like 4 months. So just like the physical toll plus the hormonal roller coaster. Even if you, and I'm not even talking about someone who is experiencing postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis. Your hormones totally tank. And I also breastfed for a long time. I breastfed my son until 20 months.
Wow.
And so that has a big impact on your hormones. I would also say the other big, specifically like kind of like early on, like early on stages. So you have like the crazy hormones. I mean, yes, you think them like really calm or whatever. That was like the first time where I lost it a bunch of times at my husband. Like, he never saw that side of me, of like this intense rage. Mothers that are watching this or hearing this, anytime that your husband or partner or a sitter or anybody messes up your breast milk, specifically the first time, you want to kill that person. And so I'm just saying that is sort of the kind of like the instance. Or I would just, I remember just like there's a couple times where I just like would start like just like crying from nowhere and being like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster family. Like just like all these kinds of just, and again, a lot of it is like that emotional roller coaster. So again, this is only my experience, but having a child, specifically in the beginning, it's like that same feeling when you just started dating someone that you really like. You're thinking about them all the time. You can't sleep, but you still have energy and you still feel good. Like, so that's sort of exactly kind of like what my experience is, specifically like early on. My son has actually been a pretty good sleeper like most of the time, and most of my not really sleeping well was more indirectly because of him, just more like the worry. Like, so our son slept in our room the first 3 months, I guess it was, but I would like constantly wake up being like, are you still alive? Are you still alive?
Wow.
And then when we moved him into the other room, it was harder for me than it was for him, of this constantly, are you still alive? So that has been like, that was, kind of like that like first stage. And then you kind of get a little bit more used to things. But again, I think specifically because I breastfed for so long, I don't really feel like I got my brain back like till its full capacity until my son was fully weaned. I still feel like I haven't fully gotten my brain back, but I felt very foggy, and it definitely made things difficult. I did go back to work about like 3.5, 4 months after my son was born, but I just didn't also have the same drive in certain projects that I had anticipated that I would work on, specifically that first year. One of the things that I was really passionate about because of my fertility journey was I wanted to put out an e-course. My whole intention was like, I'm going to get it done. I did so many videos before I gave birth. I was like on fire doing these videos. I had all the modules set up and I had to write the content, and I just couldn't even open it up for like a whole year. Like I was just like a different person. I definitely found less satisfaction in socializing. It wasn't that I didn't want to socialize and I didn't find any enjoyment, but it just wasn't where my energy needed to be. And now now at this stage of motherhood, that my son is 2, I was definitely resisted putting him in daycare. He didn't start daycare until he was about, I guess, like 18, 19 months. I was very resistant to it. But he loves it. Like, it gives him, like, some structure. It also does take some pressure off. And once putting him in the daycare, also, even before even completely weaning him, gave me more freedom of my headspace to work on the e-course. Also, I'm kind of like working on some creative projects that are filling my soul, that are related to the dance that I've been practicing for many, many years. So having that more of a balance. But I would say the problem, though, with the balance, and this is where I don't know if mothers watching this can relate, there's a lot of guilt. I don't think my husband has guilt. Maybe he does. I don't know. When he definitely doesn't feel guilty working, but I mean, pursuing, he does like some storytelling, he does some of these outside things and meeting up with friends. We actually go out a lot. We go out maybe 1 to 3 times a week.
Wow, that's more than me.
Right. So we do go out a lot. But there's like a little bit of this like guilt aspect, like this idea like, oh, that I need to be devoting every second to my child. Or even worse, like, gosh, it's terrible, but like, if I hire like a sitter so that I can get like a facial or a massage. But what if something happens to my son and I'm going to be that selfish woman that only thinks of herself?
Wow. Where's
Yeah.
that coming from? Who's telling you that?
I don't know. It's just like this weird
whose
programming.
voice is telling you this?
Yeah.
Ivy, can you tell us a little more about your e-course that you've been working on?
Yes. So this e-course is all about women in their 40s that want to get pregnant. I mean, they could have also already had a child. And I split it up to many different modules, and we're basically covering everything and anything. And it's even applicable for women who may decide that it's important for them to pursue IVF or IUI. All the tools are still even applicable for those women. I also have a special module that is geared towards women with PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis, thyroid conditions, diabetes. So I'm trying to cover a lot in this e-course and really giving a very comprehensive tools, like comprehensive set of what women can be doing, what kind of questions they should be asking to really increase their fertility. So the biggest thing we have against us as we age is egg quality and the number of eggs we have, so ovarian reserve. The unfortunate reality is unless you're actually doing IVF or have had an egg retrieval, you really don't necessarily know what your egg quality is. You could have some sense of your quantity by doing something like anti-AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone, or also looking at like day 3 FSH, but there really isn't a lot telling us about actual egg quality. And the other thing about egg quality is there is sort of this misbelief that age is like the number one factor driving egg quality and that there's nothing we can do about it, which is actually very much false. A lot of the errors or the things that actually affect egg quality really actually happen more recently, and a lot of it has to do with our repair systems and mitochondrial health. So mitochondria are just like these what we call organelles, which are just like organs inside the cells, and they're like the energy kind of like powerhouses, and that there's a lot that we actually can be doing to support egg quality. In fact, this e-course, or just even also just what I've seen in my practice is I actually will see younger women in their late 20s, early 30s that have poor egg quality. They actually have very low AMH. And a lot of the recommendations that I have in this e-course, I also apply to these women. And again, because a lot of this actually really has to do with what you really need to be doing these things a minimum of 3 to 4 months even prior to conceiving, just in the way that follicles and eggs develop and how they can basically develop these errors. So I go into a lot of, I'm a sciencey person, I can't help it, I like that, and I know for some people that is helpful. So I do talk a lot about how fertility works, how follicles are matured, how our monthly menstrual cycle works. I also talk about sperm and sperm turnover, because I also have a whole separate module that's just on male fertility. It is very important. If you're watching this, it's really important not just for you to like take care of your own reproductive health, but the partner also should be taking care of their reproductive health. So I talk a lot about, again, how fertility works and what are some of the aspects of aging that are working against us, and how we can work with that. Then I talk, specifically about supplements. So, the unfortunate reality, I would say, if you really want to boost egg quality, you are going to have to be taking quite a few things, specifically if you are an older woman. But even again, in some of these cases of some of my younger patients, taking these supplements have also really helped. So I talk a lot about specific supplements for egg quality. I also talk about testing. So not just really from an alternative testing, but one of the things I've also found, even in my patients that are working with fertility clinics, that they're not always testing everything that is important. They're not always looking at B12, vitamin D, iron levels, thyroid. So thyroid function specifically, so TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, if you have a TSH of 2.5 or greater, that is going to be very detrimental in your chances of getting pregnant. There's a lot of things that you can be doing to support thyroid function, and I have a whole separate module, again, talking about specific cases. So we talk all about all the testing that one should be doing. We look at dietary factors. What are the prime dietary changes? What are things, and both looking at the male side of things and the female side of things. I have a whole module on toxins and detoxification. So again, because we're talking about mitochondria, one of the things that are really compromising mitochondria is toxins. So you can be taking all these supplements, but if your body is not detoxifying properly. So when we think about even toxic load, what we're really talking about, what are you coming in contact with, and how are your liver, skin, your digestion, your breathing, how are these all working to eliminate these toxins? And I have a whole protocol for that is included in the E-Course. I also talk about stress management and sleep and exercise. So these are all some of the things that are covered in the E-Course.
So what are some of the things that you could share with us that people can do to make sure their egg quality is the best it can be? And the same for men. What would you recommend?
Sure, absolutely. And again, I think it also really depends on when one is trying to get pregnant. So many years from now versus a couple, maybe they're trying to get pregnant in 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. So first off, this isn't even just aside from egg quality, that there's a lot of nutrients that if you start supplementing them once you're pregnant, you've kind of missed the boat. And this is kind of a recommendation that I have across the board for all my female patients of reproductive age. You really want to make sure that you are getting enough folate, specifically methylated folate. The reason I always say methylated folate is that a certain percentage of the population doesn't activate folate. So that's really important. So it's usually, we'll say methylated folate or MTHF. So usually I will dose patients usually about 1,334 milligrams for somebody who's trying to get pregnant. Also iodine. So iodine, unfortunately, so there used to be a lot of iodized salt. Specifically, if you're eating a lot of processed food, they use cheaper salt that's not iodized.
Also sea salt.
Right, it's not iodized. So the recommended dosage for iodine is 150 micrograms. And again, both iodine and folate, you actually need to have certain levels prior to getting pregnant. Then also iron, vitamin D, your other B vitamins. So those 3 the levels don't necessarily well, I would say iron should also be adequate for sure. And then vitamin D actually can help with fertility because sperm actually has like vitamin D receptors, which I think is kind of fascinating. So this would just like be some like basic nutrients to look out for when it comes to just trying to get pregnant. As I mentioned before, specifically if you are of more advanced age and you want to get pregnant, I would just say just cut out alcohol. Just like, suck it up. I know it's not fun, but guess what? You're not going to be drinking when you're pregnant, and it really can boost egg quality. Just basically because alcohol is a mitochondrial toxin, unfortunately. It's fun, it's tasty, whatever. Just 3 months, 4 months, maybe 6 months. Just eliminate it if possible.
What about pot?
That's a good question. So pot for men, pot can actually have an effect on sperm counts. And I would say for women, I can't see that there would be a benefit to pot smoking except for, possibly maybe if you have like, for example, like a pelvic pain condition, which makes intercourse painful, but doing medical marijuana helps alleviate the pain. So then in that instance, maybe that would actually improve your chances for getting pregnant. So that could be...
It's probably also anxiety as well.
Right. So there could be some possible... But as far as like a direct benefit for fertility, I don't think that there is. Like, there's probably different nuances to it.
3 things every adult should get checked this year. What would you recommend?
So definitely vitamin D, which I'm always surprised that that's not always immediately on a panel. I don't know why that is. I would also say thyroid. And when you say thyroid, you have to be very specific. So not just TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. I think the problem is insurance, and they don't want to pay for anything. So they might just do what's called a TSH with reflex T4. So basically, if the TSH is abnormal, then they'll test the T4. Otherwise, they won't do it. But I would do, ideally, TSH, T4 total, and free. So T4 is one of our thyroid hormones. It's our less active, but that's the one that we have circulating the most. The T4 then gets converted over to T3, which is our more active. So you'd also want to do free T3 and total T3. And then lastly, possibly reverse T3. So reverse T3 is basically inactive thyroid hormone. So sometimes our bodies, it's actually a survival mechanism because like in times of starvation, you don't want to be exerting more metabolic energy. So reverse T3s are to kind of protect us. But most of us are not living in that space. And so having too much reverse T3 could be one of the reasons why somebody might feel really tired or they might be gaining weight. And their TSH actually would appear normal when something is not normal. And then also in that thyroid panel would be your thyroid antibodies, anti-TPO and anti-TG. And that's something I always just like immediately, for most conditions, it's just always good just to look at that. And then I would say also hemoglobin A1C, which is basically a marker of glucose from the past 2 to 3 months. And the unfortunate reality is a lot of people are having insulin resistance, and that's a good first step, even though I actually really like adding, with my patients, I tend to like recommend a lot more labs. I also really like to look at insulin levels with that, but again, if we're thinking about just like mainstream insurance coverage, a good hemoglobin A1C.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When is a good time to start seeking a naturopath or alternative care?
So I would say for the most part, almost every single women's health issue. And I'll say that because the conventional model doesn't have a lot. Though some people like the conventional model of taking a birth control pill for everything. But if you're someone who doesn't necessarily want to take the birth control pill to clear your acne, or to help stop your period or to regulate your period or cramping or whatever it is, and you actually want a real solution, naturopathic medicine is definitely the way to go. Then also even like when we think about autoimmune conditions, many of those, because a big part is also just like finding what is actually really going on with the person. Yes, we know that they have the autoantibodies for whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, whether it's Hashimoto's, whether it's Graves' disease, whether it's scleroderma, but why is it that they're producing these autoantibodies? And wouldn't it be better just to figure that out? And then I'd say also, like, if one, you have not gotten any solution at all, meaning you've tried you've gone to doctor, nothing is working. Maybe it's even making it worse. Or you've gotten all these tests and everybody's sending you home, there's nothing wrong with you. But you don't feel good. You have a headache. You have swollen joints. You have this rash that no one is able, one of these cases, I love talking about cases. I recently, in the past year, have been working with this woman in her 70s. She had like the worst eczema I had ever seen. It was like all over her face, her arms. She had been to many different dermatologists. She had tried like a lot of topicals. And because she had been to a bunch of dermatologists, she actually had some really good testing. And this is always something that like, I don't understand. You did the testing on this person. You got the results. Why didn't you do anything with those results? What's the point of doing testing if you're not going to do anything? So this patient had tested that she had an allergy to nickel. And they didn't. So when I saw this, I actually put her on a nickel-free diet. I kid you not, a month later, gone.
How did you even know to test for nickel? Did she do a regular allergy test?
So you do a patch test, and it is pretty standard. And yes, they didn't. So often, like when we think about nickel allergy, people just think about like jewelry
Right.
But they don't think about from a dietary standpoint.
Wow. Would never guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to do any like creams. It had nothing to do with like any kind of supplementation. It was just simply change your diet.
What food has nickel in it?
A lot of foods do. Actually, it's funny. A lot of very healthy foods do have nickel. A lot of our grains, beans, a lot of different fruits and vegetables. I mean, there's a lot of healthy foods that she can eat, but it's quite a bit of like things like salmon, tuna. There's a whole list of
Interesting.
foods. Yeah.
Would have never guessed.
Right.
Would never guessed. Ivy, what are your wellness industry pet peeves?
Yes. So I'm not into medical marijuana. Like, I'm not into anything that's like a cure-all. It's not that I'm completely anti. I think everything has its place, but I don't think marijuana solves everything. There is some good research with psychedelics, but also I don't think everyone needs to go do a ceremony or a journey or whatever that is. I'm also not a big fan of keto for everybody and everything. Again, I have seen keto do miraculous things for people who have really bad migraines. There's also some really good research with keto and actually enhancing chemotherapy, and I have actually helped some patients going through cancer treatment. So I always say I'm not a replacement for cancer treatment, but I will work with cancer patients in conjunction with whatever they're doing conventionally. But I have seen the ketogenic diet help enhance chemotherapies, also with seizures. But across the board, I have not really found it to be this great dietary intervention. And then I would just say there's just so many weird supplements, weird powders, just basically every time a patient will be like, oh, I saw it on Instagram, or I saw this on TikTok, and I'm like looking like, yeah, this is just so generic. Like, just because it says like PMS whatever, it's not looking at all the other aspects of why you have PMS or even the type of PMS that you have.
Wow. Okay. There's such a keto hype right now.
Yes.
Like right now.
Yes.
Everywhere I turn, they just swear by it.
Right. I guess like the big part too is like, because I'm not a trendy person, but if you have to create a lot of products around something, that makes me even more skeptical. So like the one kind of like, I guess like the two diet or nutritional philosophies that I think are generally good, I would say is the Mediterranean diet. And there is really good research both in like for diabetes and fertility. And one of the neat things about the Mediterranean diet, it's not like like nobody's going to take a Mediterranean, like I guess like an olive bar. I'm just trying to think of like, how would you mass produce a Mediterranean product? I don't know. Maybe there is something. I mean, I think people are drinking like olive oil or whatever, but I think overall it's like a pretty good health, nutrition way. I would say some aspects of plant-based are good. I don't necessarily believe that we need to be like, I guess anything that, again, like if that's just promoting getting more processed foods in someone, even if it's like organic processed food is processed food. So having a plant-based meal of lentils and sweet potato with some olive oil and kale, that's amazing. But some kind of like frico mushroom grown soy blend burger thing or whatever, I just can't get past that.
You're not a vegetarian?
I was actually vegan for like, so it was like 3 years. I actually do like more plant based, but yeah, I'm a complete omnivore. I definitely would say it depends on the person, and you definitely have to be careful, even if it's natural, for many different reasons. I would say most people should be on a good comprehensive multi, ideally a 1 capper or 2 caps a day max, based on what your blood work shows, because there are definitely some vitamins, specifically vitamin D, most people are deficient, but you might not be deficient, and it's a fat-soluble vitamin, and having too much can be harmful to the body. Also, similarly with iron, I don't always suggest having iron in a multi for many different reasons, and specifically because also iron, we can have too much in the body. So I rarely will recommend, typically like 1,000 IUs, which is like 25 micrograms of vitamin D is a safe place to start. But again, basing that on blood work, and similarly with the iron, really focusing more on from the dietary sources. I would say most people will probably need to supplement with iodine. And again, so everything's so different. I would say like probably like 100 to 150 max for most people, because you also have to be careful of having too much iodine, because that actually could either suppress thyroid function or the opposite, cause hyperthyroidism. So you got to kind of be careful of that. So, but again, having a good quality multi, ideally with methylated B vitamins, and again, very much catered towards your blood work, conditions that you're having. A good omega product, whether an omega-3 fatty acid, so whether it's from fish, obviously you need to make sure it's clean sourced, etc., or from vegan sources, which is basically from algae, and a good probiotic.
Perfect. How do we find you, Dr. Ivy?
So there's a couple of different places. So my website is simplicityhealthassociates.com. I am also on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel. I'm always putting out new content, and I'm also doing interviews again. Also Pinterest. So those are the main ways to find me.
What are your final words of advice for our listeners?
I would say pursuit of health is good, but it also shouldn't be like all consuming. And so kind of to find a balance. I find like people that also come to me, they're either completely neglecting their health or they're making themselves neurotic about their health. So finding that nice balance. I would say also like the other thing is just really getting back to basics. I feel, if you have the opportunity to work on a farm, I mean, like just even like a week or a weekend, just to really like get in the dirt and really experience like, where your food is actually coming from. I mean, that could even just start with just going to the Union Square farmers market and talking to some farmers, but getting more to the source. And maybe that's even more what I would say is that I feel like there's this big disconnection with where all this stuff comes from. The more we can slow down and get back to basics.
Yeah, I like that. So go out and garden.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Ivy, for being here. This was really a wonderful conversation. We hope you come again. And that's a wrap on this episode of StreetSmarts MBA. If something clicked for you, please share it, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe. And we'll see you next time.
So when you photograph any guys without shirts, you gotta pay $50. So when you photograph any guys without shirts, you gotta pay $50.